You know, we've been excited about Purim and preparing and, kind of building the energies around our home and expectation with our children. Um, okay. So now we're going to go into some of the history. So we'll give all praises to Ahia. Yeah, the Most High God. All praises to Ahia as we go into this lesson. And I am Brother and Elder Shakam Ya'ala. This is Brother and Deacon Shathak, right, with the gathering of Christ Church. And we're going to simply go into our history, get an understanding on Purim, right? And so, I'm what we're reading from? The Bible, the Holy Bible, King James Version. And you hear me refer to it as our history. We must know that first and foremost. All right, this is a history book. When we go through and thumb through these pages, and we hear of this king that reigned there, and this war that took place at this time, and the salvation of these people, and the Most High bringing the commandments, it's not a fantasy movie screenplay, fictional stories. This is a history, and to be more particular and specific, it's a history that surrounds a particular people. That's just the facts of the matter. The children of Israel, all right, which is us. We're reading of our history. That's what we're going to do today. We'll start in Esther. We're going to read through and skim through quite a bit of the book of Esther where this story and this history takes place. But let's just grab Esther 9 and 26. Right? And we're going to kind of jump to the end. All right. Well, let's just. So, are you guys at Esther 9 and 26? Go ahead. You got it, brother. Go ahead and read it for me. So, the 14th and 15th day of the 12th month. That's Purim. Right? We're just going to read that. Then we're going to just jump right to the front and go through this.
Esther 9, verse 26. Wherefore they called these days Purim after the name of Pur. Therefore, all of the words of this letter and of that which they had seen concerning this matter, and which had come unto them, the Jews ordained and took upon them and upon their seed, and upon all such as joined themselves unto them, so as it should not fail, that they would keep these 2 days according to their writing, and according to their appointed time, every year.
Every year.
And that these days should be remembered and kept throughout their generations, every family, every province, and every city. And that these days of Purim should not fail from among the Jews, nor the memorial of them perish from their seed.
They shall be remembered. They shall not fade away from the Jews, the children of Israel, and they shall be as a memorial. All right? I wanted to get that before we go into this, because this is to be remembered. This is a charge to our people to remember this every year, a holy day to be kept, and that also speaks to, as we return to who we are, and we're going to just get ready and read this, as we return to who we are and take a part of our culture and knowing who we are as a people, specifically and especially as a people who have nothing and who have had nothing to refer to or hold to or turn to concerning a history or having a foundation, having an identity whatsoever. The only things we are able to turn to are Christmas, you know, and it's easy to accept these things when that's just what you're given, and it's you know, it's indirectly deals with receiving gifts and fun times and music and songs you like, but you know, these are things from other nations. St. Patrick's Day, right? We're just handed things from others, and quite frankly, our captures. Saint Valentine. You know, I mean, it goes on and on. That I just want to show before we go into this that these are things that hold credence and validity and purpose. Where the Most High said, remember this. You know, versus putting our efforts and thought processes and teaching our children about elves at the North Pole and sleighs and flying reindeers. I mean, I have a problem teaching that to my children. Like, I don't know about everybody, but I have a problem, like, really having my daughter go for that. Like, tell her this is, you know, a white guy or whatever guy is flying around the whole world giving all the children gifts overnight. I'm not going to do that to my children. I'm sorry, I'm not. You know, we're not leaving cookies and milk nowhere for some guy to slide down the chimney. And I don't want to be offensive to no one. I don't want to be offensive. But this is some of the things that we are learning because, and I'm not going to make this into a lesson about Christmas, because that's readily available in information, but I'm just kind of setting the stage. Because all of these things I'm pointing out some of the things that sound funny and really just absolutely ridiculous, because I'm showing what we've been given. Like, children aren't the only ones who deal with this, by the way. It isn't just children. Like, I mean, you know it. We have adults who are absolutely enthralled in Santa and elves and cookies and milk and just living a fake reality. So we're going into what thus saith the Lord, the Most High God. And we're going to have as much and more fun, you know, doing it. The book of Esther. Let's start reading in the 2nd chapter. Esther 2 and 5. The title, we'll just call it Understanding Purim, or the history of Purim. The history of Purim. Our history concerning Purim.
Esther chapter 2, verse 5. Now in Shushan, the palace, there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite.
You see that breakdown, like, of history and genealogy? Just pointing out. I'm not going to keep interrupting this story. We're going to get into it. But just pointing out, these are facts. The details of who is the son, what tribe, and the generations of. This is our history. This is our history. The same way, whether it be in Europe, where they have the different shields showing this is this family, united with this family, and going back and back. No different. Whether it be the Asians or this dynasty and the Ming and they're able to go back. This is ours. It's Mordecai, the son of Zaire, the son of Shimei, and the son of Kish, a Benjamite. We know that was the Jamaicans, right? Go ahead.
Who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity which had been carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. Mm-hmm. And he brought up Hadassah, that is, Esther, his uncle's daughter.
Mm-hmm.
For she had neither father nor mother, and the maid was fair and beautiful, whom Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took for his own daughter.
So this is his cousin, his uncle's daughter. When her mother and father died, so we're talking of Esther, we're speaking of Esther. When her mother and father passed, Mordecai took her and raised her as his own child. Right? Let's stay there and move on down to the 16th verse. And you may want to go back and read this yourself. For the sake of time, we're going to kind of catch the points through this story. Right? So we have our sister, Esther, and a strong brother in the Most High, Mordecai.
Esther 2, verse 16. So Esther was taken unto King Ahasuerus into his house royal in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. And the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight, more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown upon her head, and made her queen instead of Vashti.
Okay, so we see that Esther is chosen by the king to become queen. He had sent for, those, women and virgins who would, be, possible candidates to be queen and to be, with the king, to be, the queen alongside the king, right? And so he found great favor in Esther and chooses her to be the queen instead of who was queen before, Queen Vashti. All right, let's go to, right in Esther, we're going to go to the 3rd chapter.
Esther 3.
So she's in place as queen at this point. Mm-hmm.
Esther 3, verse 1. After these things did King Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him, and set his seat above all the princes that were with him. Mm-hmm. And all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence.
Okay, so here we have this man, Haman, who is, high in ranking there with the king in this kingdom. And he is requesting everyone to bow before him. But it not being our custom to bow to any man, especially in the manner that it was expected. He was requesting to be bowed to as a lord in a form of worship even, right? And so Mordecai refused to bow and reverence this man in that manner, right? Verse 3.
Then the king's servants, which were in the king's gate, said unto Mordecai, Why transgressest thou the king's commandment?
Mm-hmm.
Verse 5.
Verse 4, right?
Yes, verse 4.
That's all right.
Chapter 3, verse 4. Now it came to pass when they spake daily unto him, and he hearkened not unto them, that they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's matters would stand. For he had told them that he was a Jew. Mm-hmm. And when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, then was Haman full of wrath. Mm-hmm. And he thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had showed him the people of Mordecai.
Right. It's the people of Mordecai. But you see this man, like he is this angry, scorned, and ready to put hands on somebody just for not bowing. Imagine the pride that this guy's dealing with. So he's ready to put hands. He didn't speak against him, speak ill, do anything. Mordecai hadn't done nothing to the man, but just not bow to him. And he's ready to, take action. Go ahead.
Verse 7. In the first month, that is the month Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast Pur, that is the lot, before Haman from day to day and from month to month, to the 12th month, that is the month Adar.
So you see when you read verse 6, and he thought scorn to lay hand on Mordecai alone, for they had showed him the people of Mordecai, his people, being that this was a custom adopted by Mordecai that was a custom of his people, not his own personal thing that he deals with, but us as a people, having no other God before the Most High, not bowing to any other God or to any other man, for that matter, in form of worship, right? So that's why he's relating this to a people. And quite frankly, that's the issue with us as a people, whether it's put in the forefront or spoken of that way directly or not. It's the God we serve. Those who set things in place above us, who set these systems in place, and it's like, man, why? What? I mean, why is this so hard pressed against us at every hand? It's the God we serve. And I'll take it even further, because it's spiritual. It's spiritual. These things rile up because they're vexed. Their spirit is vexed concerning who we serve. You notice how you could be doing any and everything in this world, moving around, causing all kinds of mayhem, illegal activity, theft, and whatever you're doing, running the street. But turn to the Most High in spirit and truth. And many times you get more pushback from people than you ever got with anything else you was doing. You was running around doing any and everything, and you was openly embraced and loved, and, oh yeah, I know you a thief, I know you a whoremonger, I know you a what's up, family. All of a sudden, they have an issue because you want to do some, what could they have against that? Deciding to follow the law. Well, it's spiritual. It's spiritual. These same spirits that lord over them are now finding issue with you. They don't want that in their space. It's spiritual. Same here. He's like, man, this people, and the same today. These people and their Lord. It's a spiritual battle, right? So it says, wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom, even the people of Mordecai. In the first month, that is, the month Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast Pur, that is, the lot, before Haman from day to day, and from month to month, to the 12th month, that is, the month Adar. So they cast lot, or Pur, where we get the term in the name of the holy day, Purim. To cast the lot, or to cast Pur. What we're talking about here is basically a game or a method of chance, almost like rolling dice, right? But in particular, specifically, he took this to his sorcerers and necromancers to get guidance the same way things happen today. To say, when and how do you foresee, and when do I get to go get these people? That's the casting of lots, of Purim, right? So that's what we're speaking of here. They cast lot, they cast Pur, that is the lot, before Haman from day to day and from month to month, to the 12th month, that is the month Adar. Verse 8.
And Haman said unto King Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all people.
You see that? Their laws are diverse. Who they dealing with? Where those laws come from? Those laws came from the penmanship of the Most High directly. That's the problem. There's the problem. That power, our strength, our God, those laws, just like today, there's a problem with you following those laws. We dealing with the same thing. Established government, those in power. This guy's like, they want to follow the law. I want to kill them for it. I want to kill them for following the law. We're going to kill. Mordecai did it. They all dealing with this to some degree. We're coming after this entire people. Spiritual. We battle not against flesh and blood. Right? Verse 8.
And Haman said unto King Ahasuerus, There is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all people. Neither keep they the king's law. Therefore it is not for the king's profit to suffer them.
So he's going to try to bring the king into it emotionally when he's the one with an issue. He's going to convince the king, this isn't for your profit. The king has no issue here. Mordecai is nothing, him not bowing has nothing that illy affects the king or anything the king is doing. But he said, this don't profit you. I need you to give me the power to move against these people. Go ahead.
Verse 9. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed. And I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of the business to bring it into the king's treasuries.
You see? And he's want to fatten the king's pocket. He's got his own ulterior motives, but he's like, some of the spoil, we're going to add to your treasuries on top of that. We see that this type of deceptive movement all the time, where people come backhandedly bearing false witness. So this is him going to the king. Go ahead.
Verse 10. And the king took his ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the Jews' enemy.
Jews' enemy. Not the overseer and making sure he's protecting and looking out for the kingdom. Like that wasn't it. He had an issue with the Jews because of the law they followed and further the God they served. So the king gives him his ring, which means he's basically now able to give a command with the power of the king behind him. He can seal when, we're not dealing with emails or electronic, he sends out the letters or puts things into law and so forth. And it's sealed with that ring of the king. So he's been given the power to go ahead and set forth and put in place whatever decree he decides and however he decides. That's what that is. Let's move on down to So we're in 3. Let's pick right back up. I'm trying to just pick through. Just keep reading from there. Just carry on from where you are. Right?
Verse 12.
Mm-hmm.
Esther 3 and 12. Then were the king's scribes called on the 13th day of the first month. And there was written according to all that Haman had commanded unto the king's lieutenants and to the governors that were over every province and to the rulers of every people of every province, according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language in the name of King Ahasuerus was it written and sealed with the king's ring.
You see what I mean? So it's as if the king is speaking. He put this in decree in his own words, exactly what he wanted, and it's sealed as if it was written by the king and sealed with his ring. Right? Go ahead.
You mind if I add one thing?
Yeah.
This brother that we're dealing with that's coming against Israel, named what's his name? Haman.
Uh-huh.
It showed, just like it showed Mordecai's history and his lineage, it's showing Haman's lineage being of the lineage of an Agagite,
right?
Which is a king of the Amalekites.
The Amalekites.
And when we go back into the history of our people, the Most High told King Saul to kill all of the Amalekites. Because, and what Saul did was he didn't kill the king, Agagite.
Right.
And because of that, Saul lost his kingship. And now we see here, hundreds of years later, when the Most High said to wipe this people off the face of the earth because their intent, they lineage of Esau, who had made a promise to come after Jacob, Israel, and Saul did not do what the Most High had ordered him to do. And now we see that ugly head rearing itself hundreds of years later to where the Amalekites are still coming after Israel. Does that make sense?
Hundreds of years later. And then what?
And even now.
Right. It's the same ones that's on our head today. That's why the Most High said, kill them all. Remember, I think we just touched on that last week, right? Where he took the kingship from him and they let some of the animals live. Remember we were reading about that? And they were saying, hey, and so they justified in their own minds. They didn't understand what was to come. They didn't understand that this man, the Most High, you don't have to always understand. Deal with some obedience, right? Humility. Right? They didn't understand that our people would, in years to come, face desolation based off of that decision to cook up a few chickens and sit down and feast and say they doing it in the name of the Most High, because that's how we do it every time. Like we take a position of being holy and righteous to be disobedient. Though the Most High talked to me, he spoke to me, he leading me to do. That's what they did. They like, it's no way that we this and that, we haven't ate and all this perfect, man. They done raised up some of the best cattle. When the last time you seen a chicken looking like that? Or a ram or everything? We got to set. But they saying, they won't pretend it's to the Most High though. But they ready to just take of the spoil, sit down and grub. But they gonna say, no, the Most High gonna want us to send him a sacrifice. Wink, wink. That's how they painted the picture. But no, what the Most High wanted was your pure obedience. The Most High knew what you didn't know. He knew what was to come now. These are the same people that spearhead what we deal with right now. So do y'all see even more so how this is history? These scriptures are jumping off of the page. And they could be written about right now. It's the same. Same reasoning behind it, same people, same thing, same battle. Right? So the Amalekites, that's who we dealing with. Just something spurred up in him, and he's ready to jump up and go against the people and take them all out with the authority of the king.
Once he found out who they were.
He's
like, oh, there they are.
Let's get them. And he had opportunity. Like, hey, Malachi didn't bow. Let's kill a nation. Really? Let's take out a whole nation. I mean, he wrote a decree, and we're going to read it, where they're ready to disperse men throughout provinces. I mean, this ain't a small issue. This is big. And he's looking to go and put a decree out and basically made it law to go out and kill them all. And it's okay. It's sealed by the ring of the king. Right? Where are we at? Verse 12?
13.
Okay.
Esther 3 and 13. And the letters were sent by post unto all the king's provinces.
The post is just those, the men. who send those things out, right? Go ahead.
And all the letters were sent by post into all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women in one day, even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to take the spoil of them for prey.
Right, so remember we were reading, they cast per or lot, and it said to the 12th month of Adar. So that's where we get these days that we're reading from. Him going to his fortune tellers and the god that, the sorcerers that deal with and are tapping into the gods that they serve to get direction. It's the same thing that happens today. To get direction on when and how we take these people down. You see that it's even the form of attack is spiritual. This is spiritual. Right? Go ahead.
Verse 14. The copy of the writing for a command to be given in every province was published unto all people, that they should be ready against that day. The post went out, being hastened by the king's commandment, and the decree was given in Susan the palace. And the king of Haman sat down to drink, but the city Susan was perplexed. Esther 4, verse 1. When Mordecai perceived all that was done, Mordecai rent his clothes and put on sackcloth with ashes, and went out into the midst of the city and cried with a loud and a bitter cry.
Right, so this command and decree has gone forth. He sees what's done, and Mordecai rent his clothes.
Verse 2. And came even before the king's gate, for none might enter into the king's gate clothed with sackcloth.
Right. Queen Esther heard of Mordecai's behavior and sent a messenger to see why he was acting as he was. Mordecai explained the king's commandment by way of Haman, and he charged her to make supplication to the king on behalf of Israel. Right? So we have Mordecai. He overhears some of these things and goings-ons. And he charges his cousin, Esther, who is more like a daughter to him. He raised her. He charges her to make supplication to the king on the behalf of Israel. However, she was afraid of being put to death for entering the king's court. I'm just kind of fast forwarding us through. You may, it's worth reading. I would suggest reading it all yourself, right? But she was afraid to enter his courts because you didn't enter the courts of the king without being requested. Even to request a meeting with the king, and this king could have meant death. If he felt that you were up to a sneaky suspicion, he could feel whatever. If he decided, why you waste my time? Why you coming in my presence? I'm the king. For whatever reason, you could be punished for in many ways, but up to and including being killed. So she was afraid. She sent word back to him to call all the Jews of the city to fast for 3 days, and she would go before the king. And you can read that. That's what I'm just fast forwarding through the 4th chapter. You see the spirituality on both sides when we're dealing correctly. When we're dealing correctly and when we are truly seeking and receiving the strength of the Most High, we deal with him through obedience. So she's like, I'm afraid to go speak to this king. I know I'm the queen of, one of his wives, but I can lose my life. Rightfully so. She was right by saying that. She knew that she could lose her life, so she was afraid. So she sent word back to her cousin, or her head, Mordecai, and said, request that the Jews, our people, all fast for 3 days, and then I'll go. Let's get the Most High involved in this.
Yeah.
You have something?
Nope.
Let's jump on down to the 7th chapter. We're still in Esther. You want to start at the first verse?
Yeah.
All right.
Esther 7, verse 1. So the king and Haman came to banquet with Esther the queen. And the king said unto Esther on the second day at the banquet of wine, What is thy petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be granted thee.
Mm-hmm.
And what is thy request? And it shall be performed even to the half of the kingdom.
So you see this? She's afraid to approach him. He don't even know what she want yet. And he's already basically telling her, whatever you coming to me for, it's no, let's do it. It's yours. Even up to half of what I have. And I want to speak on that because it speaks to the type of woman Esther was. The type of woman she had to have been. First of all, even when you read the details, that a lot of it that we skipped over initially, of just how she carried herself and how the king was enamored with her from the beginning. And I'm going to tell you, it wasn't because, she had a split up to her high thigh and the cleavage wide open and, walking all kind of ways. And eyeballing it, that wasn't it. She was a true woman of the Most High. And that was something that stands out in beauty above and beyond anything. So if he's looking at a cast of women trying to decide and choose who he's going to pick as the queen, Esther carried herself. He was enamored by her from the beginning because of her level of, ultimately it boils down to her obedience to her head, her father, her heavenly father. Dealing with that word, that humility, that respect for herself. That's what it was. So here he is. He's not seeing her as some sort of vixen who's just voluptuously beautiful and he's enamored and taken away. He sees her as a respectable woman of the true God. And he's like, if this woman is asking for my time and she has something to me, I trust her already. She's not going to ask me of something out of the way, saying she need brand new veil of crowns of thrones all over the place and a new vesture of seating to, he know that's not what he's going to get. So he's like, my dear, whatever you want, up to half of what I got is yours. What do you need? What can I do for you? That speaks to our God. He is in control of the air and the motions of the seas and the birds, our comings and goings. This word and his word is all encompassing. When we deal with it in ways we don't expect, he's working in our behalf. Okay? So where are we at? Are we at verse 3?
Verse 3.
So all of these things are in place in order for this to work in our behalf. Look at the order. Look at the order of Esther concerning her head Mordecai. There's more details of that when you read through it. Even him coming back and saying, this is what you need to do. Her being raised right to say, hey, I'm afraid. But with the Most High, this is what I'm charged to do. Let's fast and pray and we're going to do it. All that order, obedience, and humility all in place, leading up to what we're going to read about, the salvation of our people through the Most High. In the same way that I continue to correlate this as to then to now, or even times before and time again, it's all the same. Right? We're at verse 3, right? All right.
Esther 7, verse 3. Then Esther, the queen, answered and said, If I found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. Can I make a comment? You know how the scripture says to a wife, if thy husband is not a believer, that you gain him with a chaste conversation, and how it tells a woman who is a believer to deal with her unbelieving husband. That's what Esther did.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, she had a level of respect from her husband. Where most times a sister who has a husband that's not following scripture or not following the Most High want to be over his head about it. Why you not coming to Sabbath? Did you read your Bible today? You know, blah, blah, blah. That pushed him further away.
Mm-hmm.
But because of her behavior, the sister was able to have his ear. He ready to give her half the kingdom. In being obedience, like the lesson we went into, humility, and it take more strength to humble yourself and not say what you want to say. That's all I wanted to add.
Mm-hmm.
Verse 4. For we are sold, I and my people, to be I'll start at 3 again. Then Esther the queen answered and said, If I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish.
Mm-hmm.
But if we had been sold for bondmen and bondwomen, I had held my tongue, although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage.
Mm-hmm.
Then the king Ahasuerus answered and said unto Esther the queen, Who is he, and where is he, that does presume in his heart to do so?
Mm.
And Esther said, The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, so imagine the strength and power behind the words of a righteous woman. This is not a woman where the king has had multiple occasions where she just come pointing fingers and always got a problem with somebody, constantly offended for nothing. He didn't see that approach him and say, oh man, what do you want again? Who now? So there's strength in this, and the Most High's presence as well. So this made him afraid. Jump on down. Go ahead and just keep reading there.
Verse 7.
Mm-hmm.
And the king, arising from the banquet of wine in his wrath, went into the palace garden. And Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen, for he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the palace of the banquet of wine, and Haman was falling upon the bed whereon Esther was. Then said the king, Will he force the queen also before me in the house? As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face.
Mm-hmm.
And Harbonah, one of the chamberlains, said before the king, Behold also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai,
Right.
who had spoken good for the king, standeth in the house of Haman. Then the king said, Hang him thereon.
So we have, right, Haman seeking to, we this is some of it that we skipped over, right? But I see you guys, you're piecing it together. So we've got the gallows. This is a structure that Haman had specially built. He put all this love and care and special instructions into building this death machine for Mordecai, so that he could publicly humiliate him and kill him before everyone. Well, now that Haman has been seen for who he is and the evil that he had planned, the same gallows which is sitting out on display is now going to be used for Haman himself. He built his own weapon of destruction, right? So, and it says, the gallows 50 cubits high. He made this big, huge thing you can see from afar off. Just put all this elaborate time and effort into building something just to humiliate him all the more. And here they're going to throw the sack over his head, and he's going to get to deal with that machine. Right? And it says, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who had spoken good for the king. He was innocent. He was innocent, and he had a history of being good towards the king and being righteous. He standeth in the house of Haman. Then the king said, hang him thereon. Verse 10.
So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath pacified.
All right, let's move down to, let's go to the 8th verse, eighth chapter, Esther, the 8th chapter, starting at the 1st verse.
On that day did the king Ahasuerus give the house of Haman the Jews' enemy unto Esther the queen. And Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told what he was on to her, was told that he was on to her. And the king took off his ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it unto Mordecai.
You see that? Reminiscent of Joseph. He's given the position of being basically the right-hand man to the king, right? That complete turnaround, from being on death's bed and being, publicly disgraced and killed to being giving all this power right amongst the king. Go ahead.
Let me finish verse 2.
Mm-hmm.
And the king took off his ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it unto Mordecai. And Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman.
Go ahead. Keep on reading down.
Verse 3. And Esther spake yet again before the king, and fell down at his feet, and besought him with tears to put away the mischief of Haman the Agagite, and his device that he had devised against the Jews. Then the king held out the golden scepter toward Esther. So Esther arose and stood before the king, and said, If it please the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and the thing seem right before the king, and I be pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to reverse the letters devised by Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite,
right,
which he wrote to destroy the Jews which are in all the king's provinces. For how can I endure to see the evil that shall come unto my people? Or how can I endure to see the destruction of my kindred? Then the king...
Because let's not forget, regardless of what is taking place there, these letters have been sent out. Like this decree is already amongst all the nations. At this point, preparations are in place. Because when they cast Pur, they weren't given direction, or they were given direction, but the ruling, or what his sorcerers came up with, was this was to take place 10 to 12 months down the line. So there's a time span. So you've got armies and all the different nations throughout preparing. Yeah, they're preparing. At the same time, you've got an entire nation of people fearful. Like just counting down days to when it's a decree to where they're just open season. It's just hunting season on them. Right? So this is what's taking place. So now you have Esther coming to the king saying, all of this is, how do we undo what's been done? Right? Go ahead.
Can I make a comment? Even to the point that the citizens had free range to kill the Jews.
Yeah.
Like, it's very similar to what we see today.
Right.
Whether we talking about a cop shooting us down, or we talking about old boy that shot down the young man with his hoodie on. It's open, Trayvon Martin. It's open season on the Negro.
That's what it was. They were all preparing. They were getting their weaponry ready. Different nations, just like he's saying, amongst this entire kingdom, it's like everybody can do as you will with these people when this time comes. That's the setting. That's and like he's pointing out, you see how I mean, it's not far-fetched from what we live, our reality today. They've just, become more shifty and covert, but they're setting us up and allowing and setting every other nation up to set us up for destruction, where we can't operate businesses in our own home, but they promote and give special opportunity and loans and grants for other people to come in and, sponge our resources. It's the same. It's the same, just more covert. Just like and it puts us, it isn't as to the forefront, but it's a worse situation than it ever was, even though it's hidden, even more so because it's hidden. What verse are we at?
We stopped at 7.
Mm-hmm.
Verse 7. Then the king Ahasuerus said unto Esther the queen and to Mordecai the Jew, Behold, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and him that have hanged upon the gallows, because he laid his hand upon the Jews. Write ye also for the Jews, as it liketh you, in the king's name, and seal it with the king's ring. For the writing which is written in the king's name and sealed with the king's ring may no man reverse.
Okay, so he's saying go ahead and write what you will, and to combat what has already went out, because I gave him my ring, and whatever has went out in my name, it can't be reversed. Like, I can't send something else out with my ring saying disregard, never mind what I said before. It will stand, is what he says, right? Go ahead.
Verse 9. Then were the king's scribes called at that time in the 3rd month, that is, the month Sivan, on the 23rd day thereof. And it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded unto the Jews, and to lieutenants, and the deputies, and rulers of the provinces which are from India unto Ethiopia.
See that? The different nations. And we're in the 3rd month right now with this taking place. Go ahead.
127 provinces, unto every province according to the writing thereof, and unto every people after their language, and to the Jews according to their writing and according to their language. And he wrote in the king Ahasuerus' name, and sealed it with the king's ring, and sent letters by post on horseback, and riders on mules, camels, and young dromedaries. Wherein the king granted the Jews which were in every city to gather themselves together, and to stand for their life, to destroy, to slay, and to cause perish all the power of the people and province that would assault them, both little ones and women, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. So
he sent out the decree saying, hey, Israel, Jews, prepare to defend yourself. He couldn't retract what had already been said. So they sent out and said, okay, prepare to defend yourself. And you see even the righteousness in that. He didn't write something and say, he's wielding the pen. He's got the king's ring. We're going to go on the offense 10 days before this decree. We get the upper hand. It was all in righteousness. We get to take a spoil now of somebody else instead, and get the upper hand and pull them into an army to draw to us to conquer more people. That wasn't what was said. He said, you have the right to defend yourself. Prepare, mount up, and be ready. Righteous men and women of the Most High. Go ahead.
Upon one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, namely, upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, the copy of the writing for a commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, that the Jews should be ready against that day to avenge themselves on their enemies.
So this is going out in the 3rd month and preparation for the 12th month. Go ahead.
So the posts that rode upon mules and camels went out, being hastened and pressed on by the king's commandment. And the decree was given at Shushan the palace. And Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal apparel of blue and white, and with a great crown of gold, and with a garment of fine linen and purple, and the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. The Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor, and in every province and in every city, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast and a good day. And many of the people of the land became Jews, for the fear of the Jews fell upon them.
Yes. Tell me we ain't the Jews. Who else doing that? You imagine, this decree coming out and people finally feeling like, we finally got an edge on that big dude in the corner over there. It's a decree. We're going to be able to get it. Then he get a note saying, you can. He walking around like, all right, y'all remember you? You was one of them. They like, we down. What can we do to be down? We with y'all. That's what happened. They becoming Jews now. Right? Let's see. Where are we at? We're going to go to the 9th verse, or 9th chapter. Go ahead to the first verse.
Now in the 12th month, that is the month Adar, on the 13th day of the same, when the king's commandment and his decree drew near to be put in execution, in the day that the enemies of the Jews hoped to have power over them, though it was turned to the contrary, that the Jews had rule over them that hated them, the Jews gathered themselves together in their cities throughout all the provinces of the king of Ahasuerus, to lay hand on such as sought their hurt, and no man could withstand them. For the fear of them fell upon all people, and all the rulers of the provinces, and the lieutenants, and the deputies, and the officers of the king helped the Jews, because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them.
Man. So you see, they got the lieutenants, deputies, the different officials that deal with weaponry or war concerning the kingdom, backing the Jews too, because they are fearful of Mordecai. Go ahead. Let's skip down to verse 13 so we can get through this.
Let me start at verse 12.
Okay, yeah.
Upon one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, namely upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, then said Esther, if it please the king, let it be granted to the Jews which are in Shushan to do tomorrow also according unto this day's decree, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged upon the gallows.
Yeah, so you see she's requesting his sons be hanged upon the gallows. Verse 15.
For the Jews that were in Shushan gathered themselves together on the 14th day also of the month Adar, and slew 300 men at Shushan. But on the prey they laid not their hand. But the other Jews that were in the king's provinces gathered themselves together and stood for their lives, and had rest from their enemies, and slew of their foes 75,000, but they laid not their hands on the prey. On the 13th,
so they were just defending themselves, not just going after the weak or those who, weren't involved in looking to take them a prey. Go ahead.
But the Jews that were at Shushan, verse 17, on the 13th day of the month Adar, and on the 14th day of the same, rested they, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. But the Jews that were at Shushan assembled together on the 13th day thereof, and on the 14th day thereof, and on the 15th day of the same they rested, and made it a day of feasting and gladness.
You see that? This is and it's going to break it down. We're talking about the feast and preparation that was put in place as a memorial that we're celebrating coming up here in the next week or two. Purim. And that's why we took the word per, where you feel the need that you can just, gamble with our lives as a people, with, dealing with your soothsayers and necromancers, when the Most High have us. We're going to name our holy day Purim, just for you. All right, where are we at? Verse 19 or 20?
19.
Okay.
Therefore the Jews of the villages that dwelt in the unwalled towns made the 14th day of the month Adar a day of gladness and feasting, and a good day, and of sending portions one to another.
Sending portions one to another, giving gifts, right? Go ahead.
And Mordecai wrote these things and sent letters unto all the Jews that were in the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, both nigh and far. Verse 22, as the days wherein the Jews rested from their enemies, and the month which was turned unto them from sorrow to joy, and from mourning into a good day, that they should this day, verse 22, let me read that again. As the days wherein the Jews rested from their enemies, and the month which was turned unto them from sorrow to joy, and from mourning into a good day, that they should make them days of feasting and joy, and of sending portions one to another, and gifts to the poor.
Man, so can you imagine the scene, or, from going from one end of the spectrum to the other, and the type of celebration to be saved by the Most High, through the Most High, through our own obedience, and through putting the Most High first. So that's what we're looking at when we're speaking of Purim. That's what we're worshiping. And the Most High said, remember it. Always remember it. Well, look at the days and times that we find ourselves in now, right? Where we're in a place and needing help. We're marching, we petitioning, we asking, bringing up the statistics, it's documentaries all over the place, but nothing changed. So here we are, remembering that the Most High is all powerful and capable. That remembering that He is our strength. It's not about going before the Capitol and anything else. Just like we were saying at the top of the day, beginning the Sabbath, all our answers lie within the book. All right, go ahead.
Verse 23. And the Jews undertook to do as they had begun, and as Mordecai had written unto them, because Haman the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had devised against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast pur, that is, the lot, to consume them and destroy them. But when Esther came before the king, he commanded by letters that his wicked device, which he devised against the Jews, should return upon his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the gallows. Wherefore they called these days Purim, after the name of Pur. Therefore, for all the words of this letter,
call this day Purim, after the name of Pur. You want to cast lot, or roll the dice on our lives. We're going to celebrate, and we're going to call it Purim. Purim, in remembrance. Go ahead.
Wherefore they called these days Purim, after the name of Pur. Therefore, for all the words of this letter, and of that which they had seen concerning this matter, and which had come unto them, the Jews ordained and took upon them, and upon their seed, and upon all such as joined themselves unto them, so as it should not fail, that they would keep these 2 days according to their writing, and according to their appointed time every year, that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation, every family, every province,
everywhere,
and every city,
every generation, every family, every province, every city, everywhere, everyone, every generation. Go ahead.
And that these days of Purim should not fail from among the Jews, nor the memorial of them perish from their seed.
Don't forget, remember. That's why the Most High set those things in place for us. These things are things that fell away from us as a time, as He removed Himself from us. But that's why as we returned, He's like, okay, now let me give you that. Let me give you that. All right. Remember. That's something to meditate on while you're in your state. Draw upon that hope of knowing, this ain't my first go around. I've been around, you know. You all right. You in good hands. I done dealt with this before. We gonna make it. To remember. Go ahead.
Verse 29. Then Esther the queen, the daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai the Jew, wrote with all authority to confirm this second letter of Purim. And he sent the letters unto all the Jews, to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus, with words of peace and truth, to confirm these days of Purim in their times appointed, according to Mordecai the Jew and Esther the queen had enjoined them, and as they had decreed for themselves and for their seed the matters of the fastings and their cry.
And that's the second time. I didn't want to pass that over. And of their seed. And I mentioned to make a memorial for this, your seed in the next generation. The Most High knowing we're going to have to re-educate a nation. That's that importance of our children. They don't have to be thinking and waiting for sleighs and looking in the skies for Santa. Right? Almost finished. I'm almost finished, all right? Where we at, bro?
Verse 32.
Mm-hmm.
And the decree of Esther confirmed these matters of Purim, and it was written in the book.
Yes. It was written in the book. And we're reading it today. And yeah, there's the book. There's the book. It's in the book. And we need to be reading it to our children, talking about the story. I'm going to tell you, you might be surprised how much this means to your children, to explain to them. These are ways even to kind of prepare them for the conditions of life, believe it or not. I mean, it's not always how you want to put a level of fear or anger or hatred in our children. It's like, these people do this. These stories are things you can say, hey, there was a time. We are these people. People were trying to do this to us. The Most High has us. He does. This is what happened, right? To where, they find themselves in a place. You'll be able to say, hey, I know this is rough. We're going to remember Esther, remember Purim, remember Joseph, remember Egypt. That's why I'm saying, that's why the scripture's saying, remember, teach your next generation, help them remember, tell them. So don't sleep on these things. The Most High gives us these things for a reason. Even if we don't understand, do what he said. Teach your children about Purim. We got the gifts, we telling them all that. Take some time to talk about the story of Esther. Go through the points that where you can connect with them. It's ultimately make sure they know and understand that the Most High is the strength. He's what we need. So they can start relating that to not always just the huges of things of the salvation of a nation, but whatever you come into. Let's give that to the Most High. So all praises to the Most High, and with that we'll say Shabbat Shalom, and we hope it was enlightening through the Holy Spirit. The history, origin of Purim. All praises to Ahaya.